Good evening to everyone, and welcome to the final Q&A for the second night of ReelAbilities LA 2020. Thank you for stopping by. First of all, I just wanted to say we'd like to thank our community sponsors and our industry sponsors for all of their contributions, because without that, this would not have been possible. And of course, and I say this again and again and again, but it's absolutely true, for the tireless work of Stephen David Simon and his team at the Department on Disability for the City of Los Angeles, who are making this work behind the scenes so smoothly and brilliantly. Thank you all. So I'd like to introduce Carrie Sandahl, who is an artist and scholar and also a teacher in Chicago, and Lawrence Carter Long, who is an advocate, and I'm delighted to repeat this, media enthusiast, and also a friend of mine. And we're going to talk for about 20 minutes, 25 minutes, and then have a Q&A question with the audience if we can get them to join in, and we'll just go from there. Okay, so the first question, and I always say that, like, I start out slow and then we go to deeper water, but this movie is pretty much nothing but deep water. So to start out, what does a completely authentic disability movie look like to the two of you?
You start, Lawrence.
Well, I mean, we just watched one, right? So that I'll start with Code of the Freaks. I think rather than sort of single any particular film out, I think it centers the experience of disability, and that it's unapologetic in sort of taking those perspectives of disabled people and encouraging whomever the audience might be to meet them where they are. That it doesn't pander, it doesn't patronize, and I think it pushes the envelope. I think it all of those sort of tropes that we've grown accustomed to, that we kind of expect when we're watching a film about disability, be it whether it's tragic or heroic or the person's isolated. I think it throws all those things out the window. I think an authentic portrayal isn't boring, it isn't predictable, it's something that's unexpected, and it's something that we don't see enough of. You know, there's a film that I was pleased to be a part of in addition to Code of the Freaks, a narrative film that was scheduled to premiere at South by Southwest, that we were hoping was going to sort of change the rule book, called Best Summer Ever, which 65–70% of those, both behind the camera and in front of the camera, are all disabled. And it's a singing, dancing, rock and roll musical in the tradition of Grease or, Footloose, that kind of thing. I think it's those type of films that we need to be seeing more of, and those kind of things that just are really remain few and far between, as Code of the Freak shows.
And I think for me, goes along with what our main point in the film is that Hollywood films, mainstream films, even independent films, tend to use disabled people as a device to teach non-disabled people lessons. So to me, what an authentic film would be where we're telling our stories to each other, or we're assuming there are disabled people in the audience, that we can get beyond the "what happened to you" story, that we can talk about all of the interesting and complex things that go on in our lives, that we know, that really can't be captured in these tropes. And I'm seeing that happen more in the disability art and culture movement. It seems like I've noticed that there are so many documentaries coming out of artists with disabilities, so dancers and painters and theater companies, and I'm seeing more of that kind of work there. I'd love to see some more narrative films too. I'm sure that you've had some good ones in your festival. I haven't been able to see them, but I think ReelAbilities and other festivals like this are trying to, you know, give the mic and the camera to people with disabilities who have other stories to tell.
Well, to piggyback on that a bit, why do you think it is it's almost easier to make a successful disability documentary, something like Murderball, which is like one of my all-time favorite movies, and it's so much harder to make up a story about disability without screwing it up?
Well, I think a lot of that has to do with just the pipeline of training that it's very difficult to produce a narrative film. It's got so many additional moving parts. I mean, I have to say, doing Code of the Freaks, it took us 10 years. It took us 10 years to make. Wow. And we had different iterations of it. We had a research phase. It was constantly raising money. It was wanting to make sure that we were really capturing a sense of community. Even though we ended up with the Talking Heads format, we had lots of different ideas. Lawrence was involved in one of our attempts that didn't quite pan out, but we had fun trying.
What was that?
Give him the scoop, Lawrence.
Well, we did something very close to a sort of a mystery science theater approach, where clips were shown, and we were all sitting in the peanut gallery there in the audience, sort of offering our remarks as the clips were happening, just ripping off of everything that we were seeing. And it was a lot of fun. I don't know how much of it would be usable for anything, but we had a blast doing it.
I don't know what the rights issues would be in an endeavor like that, but for the love of God, please do that. Please. It was
a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun, and I think it needed, you know, one of the things that Code of the Freaks, I think, really it sets Code of the Freaks apart is the sass of the film, and just the attitude about it. You know, so much of what disabled people have been encouraged to do throughout history has been to fit in, right? To be as normal, and I say that in quotes, as possible, and shoehorn ourselves and kind of limit ourselves in the process. And people don't get to see the feistiness and the sass and the attitude that me and my friends and all the folks that were involved in Code were just kind of throwing it back and you know, letting them have it. And that's something that the rest of the world hasn't really seen yet. And I think they're starting to get a glimpse of with films like Good Camp and Code. But it's been kind of a hidden secret that's just now starting to be revealed.
Yeah, that kind of snark feels very authentic to disability community to me.
But speaking of the idea of code, I think there's an element of that it states at the end of the movie about how it's that the disability community we can lean on one another, which is a good thing. But the flip of that is that there's a certain sense of isolation, and it's an island, and in which we all live. And I think immediately of something like The Shape of Water, which is a fair enough movie in part, but at the end of it, spoiler alert, you know, they both end up underwater away from society. And yes, they're in love, that's nice, but they don't get to be a part of us, a part of the larger world. And so I just want to sort of delve into the kind of tension there between, yes, it is good that we can rely on each other, but if that's all we can do, where do we go?
I think that's what Hollywood does. Hollywood films tend to isolate us, and then disability, as we talked about in Code of the Freaks, disappears at the end of the movie.
Mm-hmm. Right.
and in one way or the other. So I think that the stories we have to tell are about community, and it's not like Code of the Freaks, we're not saying we don't want to be in Hollywood, and we have a lot of different rich voices in there. We want it all. We want our own community, and we want them to be in the mainstream, right? And I feel like that the more that we can bolster each other and also find ways to tell our own stories with each other, it kind of gives us something also then to take into the mainstream on our own terms. That tends to be more interesting and exciting. At least I'm finding this in the disability art and culture movement, that that having some time with each other allows us to create something unique that comes from us organically, or it comes from our bodies, our minds, and our senses, and that is going to move into the mainstream and then have an opportunity to change things. So it's not always about adaptation and accommodation. It's about, us bringing something that's going to change society. That's that's what I think. I think that it's not us that's leaving us out. It's the mainstream movies. I don't know. Lawrence, what do you think?
If you think about a film like that, they're not any more isolated than they were when the film started. They've got each other at the end. Maybe that's different, but they were still kind of isolated when the thing started. I think when you look at sort of the catalyst and the inspiration, if you will, for Code of the Freaks, right? It goes back to Freaks. It goes back to 1932, right? And if you watch that film, which I did again recently, it's the film and its Freaks. The original is a rejection of the compulsory conformity that we're sort of expected to want to be a part of, right? It's a pointed, blatant response to and blatantly unquestioned ableist society, and I think Freaks was among one of the first movies to say, in effect, we don't need you. We'll take care of each other, and we'll find our way without you, with or without you. And movie audiences had never seen anything like that, and I don't think they appreciated being forced to examine their own prejudices when everything they'd been conditioned to expect to that point was something completely different entirely. And if you look at the sort of the pantheon of sort of film monsters or film freaks at that point, right? Lon Chaney's Gallery of Monsters, the Phantom of the Opera, Quasimodo, you go back to Dracula or Frankenstein's monster. They were all loners. They were all outcasts, and audiences were a safe distance away. Monsters didn't have spouses or lovers or families. They didn't have a community. And but what they did do is they banded together to protect themselves. And I think that's what most Hollywood films, mainstream films, are missing, is that sense of community. And I think that's sort of, hopefully that'll be the next wave, and that'll be the next trend.
And having each other's back when we do go into the mainstream.
So do you think that it's up to us to normalize our experience or for other people? Or do we somehow need to enter into the sort of binary relationship where we need, and I hate the phrase able-bodied because of the binary nature of it, but do we need the able-bodied world in order to sort of complement that normalization?
I think we all need each other.
Exactly.
I mean, it's, and not in a non-binary way. And also the disability community is so multifaceted. I mean, you think about all of the different sub-communities within our communities and all of the other variations, because we are in every single other community. And that's what's unique about disability community, right? Or people with disabilities. We are everywhere. There is no other group that we are not also in. So I think that we are all connected. If COVID has taught us nothing else, it's that, right? Yeah. And it would be so yeah, I think it's kind of a shifting, it's like a shifting kaleidoscope where we can turn the lens on different things. It's just that we want the lens to turn on us on our own terms every once in a while, but still we're always part of a larger whole.
Yeah, I think we've been, if you look at film history, as Code of the Freak shows, Hollywood's been trying to normalize disability for 100 years now. It hasn't worked. If it worked, we'd be much further along than we are now. I think it's high time for something else, which is sort of meeting disabled people and disability communities on our own terms, and giving audiences the benefit of the doubt and the credit to believe that they can meet us there. We haven't had the opportunities to do that up until very recently, and we don't have enough of those as it is.
Okay, so let's imagine a world where this normalization has taken, it completely works. What does something like a horror film, which the history of that has relied so heavily on disability, what does that look like?
You mean historically or currently or
no, in this imagined situation where
so in this future?
Yeah.
So if disability wasn't the scary other, or wasn't a master signifier for being the villain or the victim, then what could we be afraid of?
Well, we'd be the heroes. We'd be the, I think we'd be the ones who maybe like, their Eyes in the Night, where 1942, where the detective was blind, but because he had utilized his other senses, and not that they were any stronger than anybody else's, but he was able to smell something that became a clue where he solved the crime, right? That he had a skill set that other people hadn't developed.
Isn't that already out there, Lawrence?
What's that? Yeah, this is 1940s. It was a thing called Eyes in the Night.
We've got, that's something we talk about in the film too. Or like in A Quiet Place or films.
Yeah, A Quiet Place is another one that does it really brilliantly. What you want, right? Is there's that internet meme out there that says, see the person, not the disability. Well, if you don't see the disability, then you're not going to see discrimination either. The real way to approach it is to see both and to put everything in its proper context, right? So that way you can get the accommodation. You're not doing the discrimination. And those things in a horror film, those things that might initially be seen as a deficit might become the thing that actually saves you. And I think that, what to go back to the original Freaks for a moment, I think what Browning did, which was his unpardonable sin, was that he made the audiences empathize with the freaks. They were the ones that you identified with. They were the ones that you rooted for. They were the ones you wanted to see win. Audiences had never seen anything like that before. I think in modern day horror, you'd want that same kind of effect. You'd want to have them be the disabled characters be the ones that the audiences are rooting for and cheering for.
Well, I'd like to put it out to the audience if there's anybody that has a question. I have a feeling one or two of you might. So if you use the raise your hand button and come forward, we'd love to see you and talk to you.
Question? Yep, there's a question from Micah Kirsch, so we'll go ahead and ask you to unmute, and you can turn on your camera as well.
Okay, I don't know if I have an answer as much as kind of a burning question. I guess in all the thoughts of this and what was raised by the documentary, which I really, really enjoyed. I actually saw Todd Browning's Freaks for the first time this year, and I loved that as well. But I guess what I'm wondering is, things like this, as y'all have touched on, some of the strides they do take so long to make for the representation to be better, and for the and that we're not just in an aspect of you have people. The montage that you showed was so interesting of that was shown of all the actors and the Oscar wins, and there are people pretending to have a disability that they don't have. Things like that. What I guess would be is there an answer to that representation? I mean, I know it's kind of, the work is being done to kind of chip away at making that representation be represented in a better way, and also more of it to be there and more authentically. But what is the answer? I mean, I don't know if there is an answer really, like one, but what would be the answer to that? Like, I guess, how does that happen in the narrative story in Hollywood?
Well, I think one thing that could happen is, we definitely need disabled people trained in every area. We need filmmakers, directors, writers, actors, camera operators. We need disabled people everywhere. I think that will help, because then we'll have a trained pool of people. So it needs to start all the way through the educational pipeline. That would be one thing. The other thing is that now I'm going to just sound professorly for a second, but through the whole tradition of Western playwriting, my background is in theater, but I think that it would go for literature, other painting, any form of art. Disability does not appear unless it means something. So audiences are trained that if disability appears, then it's going to be important to the plot. And so like when I was a young actor, when I was told I wouldn't be, I'd have a hard time getting cast, because there weren't very many roles for a young physically disabled woman. So I would have to play outside of, a role written for a non-disabled person, because the audience would be confused. The audience would want to know why that character is disabled. It would throw the audience off. It's kind of like, this is in Stanislavski, Lawrence, one of Stanislavski's texts, if a gun appears on stage in the first act, it's going to go off by the end. You just don't have superfluous signs like that, and disability is like that gun. So until we can have disabled people playing all kinds of roles where the disability is not asked to carry the burden of representation, it's not the whole narrative is not built around some problem started by that disability, then audiences are going to expect it. We just need audiences to get used to seeing us in lots of different places without it being about, some problem with the disability that needs to be overcome or dealt with or eradicated.
Or explained. Or explained.
Yeah, or explained.
Right. Yeah, I think that's it. I mean, and to change the playing field, I think one of the best things that we could do is just stop explaining it. I mentioned Best Summer Ever earlier. I play a cop in Best Summer Ever with my cerebral palsy swagger, and none of the disabilities in the entire film and most of the cast is disabled. It's never. You're a cheerleader. You're whatever. It's never described why you have a disability in the whole entire film. Football player, you're a cheerleader, you're a cop, whatever. It's never described once. We just do the roles. And I'm very curious once we're able to get in front of an audience to see how that's responded to and what the reactions are there. Because I'm hoping that there'll be the first 5 minutes of what the heck is this, and then people will just be in that universe. They'll just be able to roll with it. And in the United States, if you look at the CDC numbers, you'll see that people with disabilities are estimated to be 26% of the population. That's more than a quarter. And we're about 2% of the characters, not even the actors have disabilities, just disabled characters on our screens on a good day. And that leaves a lot of room for disabled people to be the guy sitting next to you on the bus or the waiter in the restaurant or whomever, to be, more of us in the world or in the movies in the way that we are in the world is a really good place to start. And Carrie's absolutely right. I think the best thing that we can do to get to that place is to, get people, disabled people, creatives who are engaged in disability art and disability culture and understand disability history and the politics, to be the creatives who are writing the stories and directing the stories and producing the stories, because they're going to come at it from a different angle and hopefully avoid those things that have become, frankly, very predictable. And
Michael.
Yeah, and the reason why we made Code of the Freaks partly is that, we spend the time dissecting these mainstream images so that that people can kind of get them out of the way and do something else. So it's kind of like we tried to put all of those ingredients together, and hopefully that upcoming filmmakers will kind of have that as a compendium of things that maybe they can do something different. That I think we're endlessly ingenious, and I'm sure there's going to be a lot of folks who will come up and offer us alternatives.
Well, it's a great teachable moment, and it's really fun and weird, which I love that. So thank you very much for your movie, and thank you for coming to ReelAbilities.
Yeah, thank you everybody who came and everyone who supported and organized this event. It was really fun. It was good to see you all.
And we've got another day, so come on back for some more movies.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. If I had one final thing to say, is that if people are creating work, displaying work, curating work that is doing it different, it's like voting, folks. You got to show up. You got to support it. If we want to see more, we got to show those bean counters that it's that there's a market and that it's sustainable. It's never going to change without you. It's never going to change without the audience.
So you all have a mission to go to bed with and to wake up and change the world tomorrow. So thank you all for an amazing day and an amazing screening. Thank you so much.
Hey, thank you, Michael. It's great to meet you.
You too.
Take care, Michael.
Take care.